Hey guys, and welcome to Ozzie Reviews, and welcome to April Q&A. Now guys, we've got a heap of questions to get through, and I still get a lot of questions from you guys, asking for my help. As I've explained a number of times, I can't possibly get through all of them, so I've had to limit that help to those of you who help me on Patreon and also donate via PayPal. So if you want me to dedicate some time specifically to your needs, by all means I can do it, but you have to be a member of Patreon or be a PayPal donator. So let's get into this month's questions. The first question I've got here is from Shane. He says, "Hi Ozzie, I have a question that really concerns me and probably others as well. I don't know much about politics, and with the election coming up, who do you vote for that's going to do a better job for Australia and most importantly support and look after us shooters?" Well mate, look, very good question, because I actually voted today. I like to get in early, and me personally, look, my local area, obviously you've got a number of candidates for the lower house, but then for the Senate, you've got a lot more options there. And that's where a lot of people will find a lot of the minor parties that may not have a local candidate in their area. So for example, you'll get two bits of paper, and you'll get a green form with, possibly, anywhere between sort of 3 to 8 or 10 candidates on it, and that's for the lower house. Okay, so you'll only have candidates in that local federal division where you are situated that you can vote for. So a lot of people get frustrated because they go, well, I want to vote for the Shooters and Fishers Party or the Liberal Democrats, or Fraser Anning's party or the Katter Party, but there's no candidates in your area. Well, look, don't worry about it, because in the Senate, in the upper house there, you can actually vote for Senate candidates, and all those parties, are represented there. So for example, here in my local area, obviously, I ended up voting for the Katter Party, so that was Matt Tomlinson from the Katter Party, but I also voted for Fraser Anning's party. One Nation was in there as well. Liberal Democrats. I'm jumping between sort of Senate and lower house here, but I made sure that no major party got my vote, or where I had to mandatory list every candidate, I made sure the major parties were last. Obviously the Greens were very last, followed by Labor, and then the LNP. And I'm sorry that it's had to come to this, but the major parties just don't support shooters. There's a million of us here in Australia, and they simply don't support us. They lie to us, they BS to us about all these promises of what they will and won't do, and then when it comes crunch time, they don't deliver. So as far as I'm concerned, shooters have turned their back on a lot of the parties, and including One Nation too, guys. Very disappointed to see how they are going, I guess, a little bit more mainstream on the firearm issue, even over to the far left when you look at people like Mark Latham and his views on firearms. I mean, a lot of people have short memories, but I don't. And I remember how he treated Bob Katter there on the Verdict program when they first stole my Adler footage, and he was screaming at Bob and saying no one needs weapons like these, and we were talking about a lever action shotgun. He just showed his ignorance and lack of knowledge when it comes to firearms. So any party who appoints someone like that isn't deserving of my first vote. So look, basically you've got to vote for who is in your area for the lower house, and then when it comes to the Senate, then you can vote accordingly. Liberal Democrats, I've always supported their firearm policy. They have a fantastic firearm policy, including self-defense with firearms, obviously for good people to be able to do that. We're not talking about criminals obtaining firearms to do that. Well, let's face it, they've already got firearms. So also too, Fraser Anning's party has a very similar policy when it comes to firearms, very strong on firearms. So, they would be the two favourites if you were voting simply just on gun rights. As for, dealing for a better Australia and really trying to fix a lot of the problems, that's why I do like the Katter Party as well, and that's why in my lower house I voted for Matt Tomlinson, because I want to see a lot of things in the farming sector fixed. because, you know, the deregulation of various farming industries, where farmers are just simply walking off their land. They're not getting any of the money that they should be, and a lot of the big supermarket chains are taking that big chunk of the profit. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with a lot of things that are happening in the rural sector, and I know that CATA is very much a party that's closely aligned with monitoring those problems and trying to fix them. So, you know, that was a healthy balance for me, you know, in my local, I guess, federal area for the lower house. But then when it comes to the upper house, obviously Liberal Democrats, Fraser Anning's party, Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, you know, obviously the CATA party, they've got some Senate candidates as well. They're all deserving of your vote. So it's up to you which you put there as your number one and then list down accordingly. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, mate. It is pretty straightforward, but honestly, what all shooters are trying to do is they're trying to put the majors last. They're simply just not listening to us. And it's these smaller parties that are coming up that obviously are going to give us a voice, and where we can actually be treated like human beings. And that's all that I ask for at the end of the day as well. Next question I got here is from Patrick, and he says, "Hi Ozzie, always enjoyed your reviews. Do you know of any issues with centerfire ammo where a live round is in the chamber but will not eject, but rounds of the same type that have been fired will eject? One explanation given to me was some brass has different thicknesses. Cheers, Pat." Mate, look, the only thing that I've ever seen is usually when you have overpressure with centerfire ammunition. So in other words, you know, you fire it, and then obviously due to the pressure there and the expansion of that brass, it does stick to the chamber, and you know, it is harder to actually extract. But if you're talking about you know, like live ammunition, and as you're putting it into the chamber, some goes in and some doesn't. Yeah, perhaps there's some inconsistency there with the tolerances there on the brass. I know a lot of the time too, like, you know, overall length will affect it as well. Sometimes there may be malfunctions when they've actually made the brass. I've seen a couple of different big manufacturers have to recall ammunition there where their tolerances are out. And it only has to be out by a very small number, and it simply won't work, or it'll have problems like that. That's the only time I've personally seen it. Look, if anybody else has anything to add to that, by all means comment below, but personally, mate, that's the only time I've seen it, and when firing, it's usually due to overpressure if that spent case you know, won't come out. Next question I got here is from Rosalind. Hi Ozzie, a bit of a city slicker question, but I have seen some YouTube videos of aerial shooting of feral pigs. What do they do with the hundreds of pigs that have been shot? Well, believe it or not, they just leave them. And that was one of the things when you go out and do feral pest control. You know, you don't get paid to clean up the feral pests in the sense of once they've been shot. Usually they just leave them, and then other animals will come along and eat them, whether that be foxes or dogs or whatever. So one thing that I do find very disappointing, Rosalind, is when you know, you go out and you'll see councils, they'll hire different feral pest controllers to come in and cull deer. And it's really disappointing when you see deer being culled and then just left on the ground. You know, that's premium quality meat that you know, could really feed thousands of people. And I just don't understand why, you know, fair enough, get the feral pest controllers in to shoot them, but why can't the council work in with that and perhaps you know, harvest that meat or use it in some way? It's a terrible waste because you know, it is such quality meat. So yeah, that's what happens. Next question I got here is from Sean. He says, "Hi Ozzie, I'm looking at putting together a rifle that will be a dedicated night vision unit. I've decided on a Hauer 1500 varmint in 308 with an Oryx chassis. The night vision unit I will be getting is the PARD 008. As with other night vision units, you have to have your eye right up against the scope. So to help with recoil, I was going to get a muzzle brake, but someone pointed out a flash hider that will be better for night vision use. Do you have much experience and recommend any muzzle brakes, flash hiders or hybrids? Once again, thank you." Well, mate, the muzzle brakes and flash hiders obviously have two different purposes. You probably know this anyway, but this is just to educate anyone who's watching. Obviously with the muzzle brake, the design or the purpose of it is to push those gases out to the side and reduce recoil. The negative side of that obviously is it makes things virtually twice as loud, and obviously if you're looking through of a night time, then there's going to be a lot more gas coming through, and you're going to get in most cases a lot more flash. Okay, you're going to see that of a night. So a flash hider is exactly the opposite. It's going to hide that flash. That's what it's designed to do, and it's not designed to function as a muzzle brake. So in other words, it's not designed to lower the recoil, push those gases out the side. All it does is reduce the flash that you'll see of a night time. So there are hybrids out on the market now. A lot of products that I've used from BCM Gunfighter have been pretty good, on like the AR system. So they do make one called the Comp Mod 1, and it's a hybrid. So, you will have that reduced recoil, but you will also find that there's decent suppression of that flash. So mate, just hunt around. There's various places in the States that sell them, and a lot of them that do send international. I don't think you'd have too many dramas in getting one out here. The other one that I've used, and I've still got to this day, I ran it on both the SR556 and the SR762, was the one from Wilson Combat. So just the standard Wilson Combat flash hider, and I found that pretty good, but I wasn't running night vision stuff on it, I have to admit. But try that BCM Gunfighter one. I think you'd be pretty happy with that. Next question I got here is from Brett, and he says, a while ago you reviewed some wooden transportable benches, just wondering where they may be available from. Well mate, yeah, it was from ATA Tactical, so they didn't have a website or anything, but if you look up ATA Tactical shooting bench, under my channel, you'll see the details there. There was a mobile number, and there was also a email. Now it was around about $225, $250, so it was made of ply. So once you actually got that out in the weather a fair bit, even if it was left out overnight and a bit of dew got into it, it would start to warp over time. So it's probably better to get one made with marine ply so that it actually handles the elements. But honestly, mate, if you want something that's going to last you an absolute lifetime, the bench that I'm using now is the one from HF Fabrication, and that portable shooting bench is just fantastic. You can leave that out in the elements and it just doesn't bother it, because HF Fabrication make a lot of custom trays for four-wheel drives and stuff like that. So not cheap, about $1,000 you're going to be looking at. But I mean, it's just worlds apart from obviously the cheaper, ply ATA Tactical bench. So just depends on one, what your use is going to be, and two, what you want to spend at the end of the day. Next question I got here is from John, and he says, "G'day Ozzie, any chance you can give us a rundown on the types of steel you'd recommend on a hunting knife, survival knife, and just run-of-the-mill bush knife? Interested to know what you consider a good steel that holds its edge, is relatively easy to sharpen when required, and is somewhat corrosion and rust resistant in all other types of weather conditions. Rating each characteristic you feel is appropriate from 1 to 10, as you normally do, would be awesome. Cheers, mate, John." You know what, John, honestly, I think I'd probably be better off doing a video on it and showing different examples, perhaps have it as part of my beginner series. So I think I'll do that, mate, so keep an eye out for that. But just to give you a basic rundown here, is obviously the range of steels from the cheaper stuff right through to the super steels, as I call them, is massive. There's so many different types. But what you usually find, the general rule is the more that you have in edge retention, the harder it is to sharpen, okay? And then also too, to throw in another, aspect to it, is you've also got corrosion resistance. So that's another balancing act as well. So there's a couple of decent steels that I highly recommend, that I think are fantastic. What I might do, mate, is I'll get on and I'll do that video and I'll have it released as soon as I can. So keep an eye out for it, because I'll go into it in a lot more depth for you. Next question I got here is from Chris, and he says, "Hey Ozzie, what is a collector's license and what does it let you do? I'm mostly interested in collecting iconic and historical handguns. Do you know much about this field? Yes, 100%, mate. I've had a collector's license for many, many years now. Even before I was doing contract shooting, I had a collector's license. So I'm very familiar with the process. Obviously, I'm not that familiar with other states other than Queensland, because obviously that's where I live, but I can give you a rundown there. Now, firstly, if you haven't seen my video on how to obtain a collector's license, please have a look at it, because I go into great detail there. But to run you through it here, basically, yes, you can. When you get a collector's license here in Queensland, you've pretty much got to do a safety course for every category that is temporarily inoperable. So what they mean by temporarily inoperable is usually a trigger lock fitted or the bolt removed, just something like that. So you don't have to weld the firearm up so it's completely useless. The only exception to that is category D and category R, which is full auto. Here in Queensland, or 50 cal BMG, that has to be permanently welded up, okay, and there's no option for that. Now, ABC is only temporarily inoperable, so no dramas there. You can have firearms that are obviously operable, and when it comes to H, there's a exemption there. So normally it's permanently inoperable. However, if you're a member of an accredited historical or collectors club, then it can be temporarily inoperable. Okay, so that's what you'd want if you were collecting those handguns, because let's face it, the value will just fall out of it once you start welding them up completely. Now, that's it. Now, as for actually using them, no, you can't just go to a range or anything like that. You must have a approved collector shoot, which is organised through the actual historical or collector club that you're a member of, and each one of them will be different, okay? So keep an eye out, because I do know of another club that's coming up soon that will be definitely having those sort of shoots, and I'll definitely announce it on the page. So fantastic, you can have Cat C, and there's no limit to the amount you can have. You can have your Cat H, and it's not limited to magazine restrictions, any of the nonsense with minimum sizes on barrels, and also you're not restricted to caliber restrictions as well. So, it's nothing like having a sports or target license for Cat H. So definitely worth doing. Next question I got here is from Richard, and he asks, G'day mate, what's your thoughts on the differences between 7mm 08 and 7mm Remington Magnum? Well mate, there's a big difference in recoil for a start, and downrange energy. Now the 7mm 08, I'm not sure if you know, but it was promoted heavily as the ladies 308, and the reason for that is because it was still obviously sending enough energy downrange to take a lot of big game, but it had substantially less recoil than a 308, hence why they called it a ladies 308. So look, a good caliber, there's nothing wrong with it at all. The 7mm projectiles have a very good BC or ballistic coefficient, but it's expensive. Like I had one a few years back now, and I was paying double the price for factory ammunition to what I was when there was sale prices on 308 ammo. So it was really expensive. So unless you're going to reload, I really would just stick to a 308, to be honest. Now, as for the 7mm Remington Magnum, look, very flat shooter. Obviously, it's like the 7mm 08, but with a lot more charge behind it. So, once again, a fantastic round. But it just depends on what you're actually going to use. I mean, like if you were looking for a 7mm 08 or a 7mm Remington Magnum, to shoot like feral dogs, for example, like honestly, I'd probably just stick to the 7mm 08, because, how far are you going to be shooting these dogs? 7mm Remington Magnum to me is, more for taking, deer at a couple hundred yards where you just want some real hard hitting power. That's the type of cartridge that it is to me. Or you're going to be doing some real long range varmint shooting where you want something to shoot extremely flat. I don't really see any other real practical uses for it. Because you're going to be paying a lot for the ammunition for it, and the recoil on it is pretty substantial as well. So they're just factors that you've got to take into consideration. Next question I got here is from Edward, and he says, "G'day Ozzie, mate. What's your thoughts on the Bushnell rimfire scopes, and how's the one from your review holding up? Well, mate, I don't have it anymore. To be honest to God with you, all those, cheaper Chinese or Filipino made rimfire scopes, got rid of the lot, because I've now got a couple of the actual Leupold VX Freedom rimfire scopes. I find them a lot better quality. I just like something that's not made in the Philippines or China on my own stuff. That's just how I am, mate. I'm a real stickler for that, I know, but or a snob, probably the better word. But I just don't trust any of my equipment, like my personal equipment I'm talking about, with Filipino or Chinese made scopes. Japanese made scopes, no problem at all. Obviously American made scopes, no dramas there, and European ones, obviously that's a given. So yeah, personally for me, I would much prefer to be running a Leupold VX Freedom rimfire on my rimfires, and I have one on every single one of my rimfires except for my semi-auto 22, which I've got an aimpoint red dot on. So that's just being honest with you, mate. Now, I'm not by any means saying that you're going to have problems with a lot of those cheaper scopes. They may run for you for years and years and years without failure, but I just don't like to have them on my own personal equipment. A lot of people will say, well, why? What's the issue with it? Well, the issue with it is a lot of those cheaper scopes is once you start doing tests, with tracking, or you change the magnification on them, they're just not as consistently accurate in holding that zero is what better quality scopes are. And that's just the way it is. If it wasn't like that, you'd have cheap Chinese scopes, sitting on top of sniper platforms in the military if they were really that good. So for me personally, I would just prefer to go up to a Leupold. That's my benchmark. That's where I'll start from. And then usually I'll go up from there on my own personal stuff. Okay guys, so that concludes this month's Q&A. Once again, a big thank you to all of you who have submitted the questions there. And for those of you, on YouTube, because I know a lot of you follow me on YouTube, but not on Facebook and different social media, these are the new Ozzie Reviews caps. So if you do want one of these, please go to aussiereviews.com and then you can click merchandise, and there's a heap of the merchandise there. It surprises me that I still get questions from people asking me, how do I get the merchandise? I'm thinking, geez, I've promoted it enough surely. But anyhow, guys, that's where you can get it from. So you'll be able to order the whole range of different stuff that I've got from there. All right, guys, we'll leave the Q&A at that, and we look forward to the questions on next month. So we'll catch you then.